The evening was supposed to be quiet, the kind that slips softly into the night with a gentle hum of distant traffic and the smell of roasting corn drifting from the street vendors. But everything changed the moment the little boy stumbled into the alley, clutching his chest as if trying to hold himself together. Tears streaked across his dusty face, and breath coming out in broken, terrified gasps. His voice trembled as he cried out that someone had hit his grandmother, that she was lying on the ground inside their small apartment at the end of the lane, that she wasn't moving. His tiny hands shook violently, and the panic in his eyes was the kind that came only when a child witnessed something no child ever should. And as he cried those words, everything around him seemed to freeze. The street noise quieted, the world paused, and only his raw fear remained echoing in the air. Within seconds, a cluster of heavy motorcycle engines roared awake, their deep growl cutting through the stillness of the evening, and the bikers, towering figures with leather jackets, steel-toed boots, and faces hardened by life, turned toward the boy. When they understood what had happened, they didn't waste a second. Helmets dropped, side stands snapped up, and without a single word spoken, they rode forward and parked right outside the man's door. If you are watching this on YouTube and believe in kindness, justice, and second chances, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know. The boy's name was Aram. Only 7 years old, thin from hardship but brave enough to run for help when the world collapsed around him. His grandmother, Razier, had been everything to him, the one who raised him after his parents disappeared from his life, the one who patched his torn shoes, soothed his bad dreams, and saved every extra coin so he would never go to sleep hungry. She was the kind of person neighbors loved, not because she had anything to give, but because she always tried to help even when she herself had nothing. But kindness, in the wrong place, sometimes stands in front of cruelty unarmed. And the cruelty came in the form of their landlord's son, a man well known for his anger, his drinking, and the way he believed the poor owed him their silence. Earlier that day, he had stormed into their home demanding rent they didn't yet have. Razier had promised she would pay in 2 days once her cleaning job paid out. But the man, intoxicated and impatient, didn't want to hear anything, and all Aram remembered was him raising his hand, the sound of a strike, the scream that followed, and his grandmother falling hard against the corner of the wooden cupboard. The boy froze at first, then cried, then ran. The bikers who heard him were not strangers to pain. They came from rough pasts and streets that had not been kind. They had seen things that could either destroy someone or build a fire inside them, a fire that made them protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Known around the neighborhood as the Road Lions, their presence was often misunderstood. Their jackets, tattoos, roaring bikes, and intimidating appearance made people assume they were troublemakers. But the truth was different. Many of them had grown up without guidance, without love, without protection, so they vowed never to let another helpless person suffer if they could intervene. And when Aram's words shattered the calm evening, something inside them snapped. The man who stepped forward first was Zayn, the one everyone quietly acknowledged as their leader, not by title but by spirit. He had lost his mother to domestic violence years ago, an experience that carved deep scars he never allowed to close. So when he heard Aram's trembling voice say his grandmother had been hurt, something dark and quiet stirred in his chest. In seconds, he and 6 of his men were off their bikes and moving toward the small apartment, their shadows long and heavy against the dimly lit walls. Inside the cramped, worn-out home, the sight was heart-wrenching. Razier lay on the ground with her head turned awkwardly, her gray hair scattered across the floor, and her breathing shallow and uneven. Zayn bent down, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone with fists hardened by years of fighting life. He checked her pulse, brushing away strands of hair from her face, whispering words meant more for comfort than information. The others worked quickly, one bringing water, another calling an ambulance, another making space around her. The little boy clung to the doorway, unable to step inside, watching with eyes wide from fear and hope all tangled together. The landlord's son, however, unaware of the storm approaching, had locked himself in the room next door. Maybe he thought his name or his father's influence protected him. Maybe he believed no one would stand up to him. But the sound of heavy boots echoing across the narrow corridor told another story. Zayn's men gathered outside the door, their silence louder than threats. When they knocked firm, slow, controlled, the man inside hesitated, and that hesitation told the bikers everything they needed to know. But Zayn didn't want fury to guide him. He wanted accountability, justice, and above all, protection. So, while two bikers stayed by the door, he focused entirely on Razier. When the ambulance arrived and paramedics rushed in, Zayn helped them lift her onto the stretcher. Aram tried to climb onto it with her, fear taking over again, but Zayn lifted him gently, holding him close, telling him he would not be alone, that his grandmother would get help, that everything would be taken care of. Neighbors gathered, whispers filled the air. Some recorded, some prayed, some shook their heads, knowing how dangerous the landlord's family could be. But none of the community had ever seen someone stand up to them so boldly. As the stretcher was rolled out, the bikers formed a protective wall around it. No one touched the child, no one interfered, and they drove behind the ambulance, their motorcycles roaring as if announcing to the world that injustice would not go unanswered. At the hospital, the reality was harsh. Razier had suffered head trauma, her condition serious but not hopeless. Doctors rushed her into the emergency ward, leaving Arm trembling in the hallway. Zayn sat beside him, not speaking immediately, letting the boy's silent sobs flow without interruption. When Arm finally spoke, it came out broken, like something had cracked inside him. He asked if his grandmother was going to die, if he had done something wrong, if running away made him a coward. Zayn felt the pain in each word. He placed a hand on the child's shoulder and told him that running for help made him brave enough to save the only family he had. Hours passed. Darkness filled the windows. The bikers took turns bringing food, blankets, and warm tea. Hospital staff who had once looked at them with suspicion began to understand that these men were not threats, they were guardians. One nurse even smiled, thanking them for keeping the hospital quiet and orderly despite their intimidating appearance. Zayn stayed by Aram's side, knowing the boy needed stability like air. Meanwhile, word spread back to the neighborhood. The landlord's son, realizing the situation was no longer under his control, became desperate. His father warned him that the police might get involved, that the community had witnesses, and that if the bikers decided to take justice into their own hands, the consequences could escalate fast. Fear made him bold in the wrong way. He tried to sneak away from town, but the bikers who stayed behind had already anticipated it. They didn't harm him, didn't touch him, didn't shout at him. They simply blocked his car, called the police, and made sure he couldn't flee from accountability. Back at the hospital, morning slowly crept in. The hallways warmed with light, the smell of disinfectant mixed with hope. Then finally, a doctor came out and told Aram that Razier was stable and would recover. The emotions that burst from the child were almost too big for his small body. He cried, not from fear this time, but from relief so deep it broke everyone around him. Zayn pulled him close, feeling his own eyes sting, something he rarely allowed. When Razier woke, Her first sight was her grandson, clinging to her hand. Her second was a group of bikers standing respectfully by the door, trying awkwardly not to look emotional. She smiled weakly, and that smile healed something inside all of them. It reminded them of their own lost families, the mothers they couldn't protect, the homes they once wished they had. Over the next days, the bikers visited regularly, bringing food, offering to repair the broken furniture in Razier's home, even giving Aram a new school bag, shoes, and a set of books. The community watched as the toughest men in the neighborhood treated an elderly woman with the tenderness of sons and cared for a child as if he were their own. Even the police, once skeptical, acknowledged that things might have turned out far worse if not for their intervention. By the end of the week, Razier was strong enough to return home. The bikers escorted her back, blocking the street from the landlord's family, who now stayed silent and cautious. The community applauded quietly, grateful for a rare act of courage done not for glory but for humanity. And for the first time in his life, Aram felt like he wasn't alone in the world anymore. He had his grandmother, he had safety, and he had an unexpected group of protectors who would always be there if he needed them. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more meaningful stories to life. Before the ending, please comment below what would you have done if you saw a child asking for help. Razier's home was repaired. The landlord's son faced legal consequences, and the bikers became local heroes not because they sought recognition, but because they couldn't stand by and watch injustice win. Zayn often visited Razier just to talk, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes bringing nothing but a listening ear. Over time, Aram began calling him uncle, a word that warmed Zayn in a way he hadn't felt in years. And slowly, bit by bit, the neighborhood changed. Two people became braver, kinder, more willing to stand up for one another. Because sometimes, one act of courage, born from one child's tears, is enough to shift the heart of an entire community. In the end, Razier lived to see her grandson grow safely. Aram learned that family can come from unexpected places, and the bikers realized that even the toughest hearts can be softened by the right kind of love. And the street where fear once lived became a place where no one ever felt alone again.